Welcome into the Paul Kuharsky podcast. I'm Paul Kuharsky from paulkuharsky.com. I say it 3 times. We get good luck or some such. I am at Edley's in Berry Farms, my home base. Most of the time, happy to be back here smelling barbecue, maybe a big lunch ahead. After the show, couldn't be more excited about that. Good to see people filtering in. Happy to be here at Edley's, my favorite place. Also sponsored by Zen Sports, the best place to bet if you are in Tennessee. We're going to talk about a new comp for Cam Ward, the Titans' very likely incoming quarterback, wide receivers at 35, and some of their comps with Dane Brugler's beast out at the Athletic. Will Levis's progress. I talked to Jordan Palmer, his coach, for his time away from the Titans, and we've got some information about what he's doing out in Dana Point, California. And all your questions, obviously, like we usually filter through during this fine hour of broadcasting. I'm happy to see you. Royal Wynn wants to know if he could put me down as a reference for a creative director job. Am I familiar with your work, Royal? I'm not familiar that I'm familiar. So if you want a somewhat comedic reference, yes, put me down. It would be an adventurous recommendation. Trevor, Royal, Focus, CA, good to see you. CA wants me to tell them not to mess it up. It's a broad thing to ask, and I don't think that I will be passing that along, but I think that they know that the Tennessee Titans are fully aware that not messing up this draft is a major obligation and duty with what they need to do here. I asked in the text that I sent out alerting members that this podcast was taking off who your favorite wide receiver at 35 is. Ivan Gregory says that Luther Burden scares him. It's a huge gamble. We'll get more into that. Am I worried about his character? Smashville Sports asks. I'm not worried about his character the way I'm worried about Pierce's character, the edge from Tennessee. I mean, you get him out there and you've got to get him working at practice and convince him, about what life's like as a pro. I think you have a feel for him at this stage after talking with him, surely at the combine. I don't recall off the top of my head if he's been a 30, but I would imagine for sure he's been or will be a 30 visit. And you get that. Royal Wynn likes Restrepo. I think Restrepo is very much a slot guy, and I need a guy that could definitely play inside and outside. And so you can't take Restrepo just because he played at Miami with Cam Ward. And if you're going to do that, I would be more likely to do it with the tight end. Egbuka, Ivan Gregory likes, and I like him as well, but he thinks they're trading 35 to pick up more picks. I think there are certain guys, and we've had this conversation, certain guys at 35 that are too good to pass up. And in the receiver basket, I would think Burden and Egbuka are maybe the two receivers that would keep you from moving down. Dax Thompson is saying that he'd be shocked if Egbuka made it to 35. I would as well. Mario says he randomly watched the Raiders-Titans game from 2003 and thought it was funny that a Callahan coach team lost the game largely due to a ton of pre-snap penalties and poor special teams. A Callahan coach team beat the Titans in the AFC Championship game to go to the Super Bowl. So that's the game you should be rewatching. All right, let's start with Ward. Let's talk Cam Ward before we talk about Cam Ward's potential receivers, presuming he is the pick at number 1, which seems more and more likely. I think it's only a slim chance now that they're not taking Cam Ward. At number one, Dane Brugler of The Athletic, who I've known for a long time, is arguably the best draft analyst there is, works it this year round. The Athletic, if you're not a subscriber, is worth it just for access to his incredible beast, which hits on virtually anybody you could be interested in the Titans drafting. And that came out just a couple days ago. They've reformatted it also, and it's much more visually pleasing. And here's his last paragraph on Cam Ward. Ward must button up his drifting footwork and cut down on the reckless habits, but he is a loose, instinctive passer who can rip accurate strikes with a natural rhythm to his play. With his talent and intangibles, he projects as an NFL starter in the mold of a taller, slower version of Kyler Murray. Now, we've been talking a lot. I've talked about it with Braden Gall on a football show. I talked about it extensively with Robbie Stanley when I filled in for Joe Rexroad earlier this week on Robbie and Rexroad, about Baker Mayfield as a comp, in that he has some elements to his game that are like Baker Mayfield, and in Baker Mayfield kind of being like a line in terms of number one overall pick production. Would you be happy with Baker Mayfield level production? Now, Baker Mayfield in his first 2 years in Cleveland was pretty good. And in his fourth year, his third year, he was down. And ultimately, they decided to chase Deshaun Watson instead of going with Baker Mayfield, who then kind of floated for a year. Where was he? Carolina, and then the Rams. Resurfaced in Tampa Bay, and he's been quite good. And last year in Tampa Bay, threw 41 touchdowns and 16 picks. And I think most, I tweeted out a poll question like, would you take 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, 16 interceptions as Cam Ward's peak year? 90% of people, 91% of people said yes, which is absolutely the correct answer. 41 touchdown passes for a Titans quarterback would be an outrageously high number. And I think that people who say, no, look at the 16 picks. Well, the Titans are very pick-conscious team, but you're a very pick-conscious team when your quarterback's throwing 18, 22, 26 touchdown passes. If he's throwing 41, 16 picks is absolutely acceptable. But Kyler Murray as a comp is a whole different story. Kyler Murray, and he's talking more playing style than production. Kyler Murray's got a 92.4 passer rating in an age where that's not quite as attractive as it used to be. Still, that's pretty good. QBR 66.5, 238 passing yards a game, 115 touchdowns and 57 picks. So the raw numbers sound pretty good. But when you look at Arizona and you think about that's a bad franchise, a worse franchise than the Titans. What have they done with Kyler Murray as their starting quarterback? They're 36, 45, and 1 with him. And I know we weren't talking wins and losses as much with Mayfield, but I think most of us feel a lot worse about Cam Ward being a taller, slower version of Kyler Murray than we do about him being some kind of version of Baker Mayfield. Now, there's a lot of space there, but Kyler Murray might be a pretty good fantasy quarterback, and he offsets some of his passing stuff with running stuff that you're not going to get from Cam Ward. But I don't love him as a Kyler Murray caliber guy. Royal says Baker's production has been great in the right system. Titans have the O-line on paper, and they have to protect the quarterback. You've got to get the O-line to a certain level. Presumably, they're at that level now. But Cam Ward's going to be more evasive than Will Levis was. And good quarterbacks are allowed to play well with not great protection. Not horrible protection, but not great protection. They're allowed. Dwayne says, I do not like Murray. Actually, like Mayfield better than Murray. I think that would be pretty universal, to not like the idea of Kyler Murray as the comp nearly as much as Mayfield as a comp. Moses is pretty fast, Royal said, and Focus says, guess it depends on which Moses. I would agree with that as well. So that's the noteworthy thing about Cam Ward that came out of the beast to me. And I think that's a key. Royal chimes in that the Bucs O-line has been fantastic, and that's because of their left tackle. I hope Moore can come through. I hope he knows the history of what he's walking into. I don't think the history of what he's walking into should matter to him at all. He needs to come in and play good left tackle. What does Andre Dillard or the guy before him, Dennis Daly, matter a bit to Moore? Or for that matter, Brad Hopkins or Michael Roos or Taylor Lewan. None of that should mean a damn thing to Dan Moore. I mean, if he's a historian of the game, it's one thing for him to look at it and consider the history of the position on at his new franchise. But I don't think he needs to know a thing about what the Titans have been at left tackle, as opposed to concentrating on what he needs to do. Yeah, now here's Ivan Gregory pointing out that Louis Riddick's comps Ward to Mahomes. Yeah, Ivan says, I feel it's a stretch, but Riddick knows more ball than Ivan does. Yeah. I mean, I think it's silly season in terms of people like, what is Cam Ward's absolute upside? But yeah, Mahomes, right? Not even Mahomes. Some lesser version of Mahomes like play. Sure. It's the very, very good version of things, I think. John Kemper says, the worst thing about being picked number one this year is how many times I've heard the name Cam Ward. As much as he's talked about, he better be the second coming of Jesus. I mean, this is the way it goes, right? It's been this way for a pretty long time now with the number one pick in the NFL draft. Titans haven't been up there, which is a good thing for the franchise, but you're going to hear a shit ton about the guy who's going to be the number one pick and the team that's going to take the number one pick. And, 75% of it, ballparking, is going to be high praise of the league's next star, right? Everybody's going to love him and tout him. Royal, back on this Dan Moore thing, says he needs to know why we came at him if and when he goes full Dillard or Duncan. Why does he need to know why he came at him? I mean, they told him we need a good left tackle, and they're paying him $20.5 million a year. Again, I don't think the context of Dillard and Daly should mean a thing to him. Yeah, and Kemper says that's completely understandable, just exhausting. Yeah, no kidding. Todd Downing is a wide receiver coach, CA, in New England for his best boy. Mike Vrabel. Speaking of best boys, there's my best boy. Rest in peace, Finley Kuharski. House is not the same. That's why we're delayed to Friday instead of Saturday. I do not, Robert. Robert asked, do I think it will get to a point that the Titans pretty well announced Ward as the pick ahead of the draft? The Titans are so, and this dates for multiple regimes, but the Titans are a lockstep organization with the league. The league doesn't want it out there who the first pick is before um, before the TV show begins. And so, I mean, I think multiple people will report it. You could report it now, pretty much, but I think they will deny it and just be vague and quiet as much as they can. I appreciate all of you expressing condolences about Finley, and the response to my piece about him was really, really sweet, and I appreciate that. Tall Texan says it does the Titans no good to announce. I mean, I'm not saying they put out a press release, but it's kind of silly to pretend like you're not taking him when you're taking him. It does them no good. It also does them no good to pretend like they're not taking him when they're taking him. Tall Texan, I think you're suggesting that somebody's going to come and bowl them over. Somebody comes and bowls them over, whether or not they say they're taking him doesn't really change anything. And if he's their guy, Borgonzi and Callahan both said this to me at the owners meeting. If he's their guy, there's no price tag, and there shouldn't be. If you think this guy is going to turn into a big time NFL starting quarterback, well, you don't give up something for a big time NFL starting quarterback. You don't, and that makes perfect sense. Yeah. And don't bring up the movie Draft Day. It's friggin' ridiculous. Yeah, Ed Henry says, is there such a thing as a good wide receiver for Ward? Either you're a good wide receiver or not. And let me tell you this, in the Pro Football Hall of Fame discussions about wide receivers, and we've been considering a lot of good wide receivers for a long time. Andre Johnson got in last year. Reggie Wayne and Torrey Holt are kind of stuck in neutral in that consideration, but there's been a lot of evidence provided that good wide receivers are good no matter who their quarterback is. You look at Andre Johnson, and he never played with a good quarterback. And you look at Torrey Holt, and he had Kurt Warner for a good share of his career, but he also then played with Mark Bolger, right? Mark Bolger's no all-star. Reggie Wayne, had Peyton Manning, but other great receivers, Larry Fitzgerald, who was his quarterback, and he's going to be an automatic guy this coming year, I think. So you can find Hall of Fame receivers who played with phenomenal quarterbacks and were a pairing, and you can find Hall of Fame receivers who did not. I mean, do we think Jamar Chase wouldn't be good if he was playing with if he played with Ryan Tannehill as opposed to playing with Joe Burrow? I think Jamar Chase is a great receiver no matter who his quarterback is. Justin Jefferson is a great receiver no matter who his quarterback is. And I think statistics over time prove that out. Yeah, I think the Royal saying his comp for Cam is McNair. His highlights look like they came out of Alcorn State. He's saying he wrote Akron State. Um, it's there are a few highlights of Cam Ward that look like Steve McNair, that look like the second to last play of Super Bowl 38, where he gets away from Kevin Carter and he almost goes down with his hand on the ground and gets out of it, makes a throw, I think, to Wycheck, might have been Dyson, that sets up the last play. But Cam Ward's not doing that all the time, and I don't think it's a good comp at all, because you have to be a runner to be comped to to Steve McNair, and Cam Ward is not a runner. It's not, and Royal goes on to say it's uncanny at times. Steve McNair ran 75 yards down the middle of the field in Tampa Bay to score a touchdown. He made some ridiculous runs, and Cam Ward averaged like 3 yards carry at Miami, under 4 yards a carry. So it's not the same. Not the same. Let's talk receivers. I'm curious what you guys think about receivers in this draft. And I'm going to stick with the comp theme. Now, some of these comps are from Brugler at The Athletic, but he doesn't comp everybody. So other ones are from the Ringer. But let's talk about him. Luther Burden is a guy that we've talked about. Maybe if he's there at 35, they're going to, if they like him, he's the kind of guy that would prevent you from trading out of 35, as good as he is and as good as he can be. And the comp from the Ringer for Luther Burden is DJ Moore. Well, sure as hell. And I'm not saying these comps are set in stone or anything like that. It's a fun game to play, right? If you could have DJ Moore, that would be terrific. Egbuka, the other guy who I think might be a stop sign at 35 for a team in need of a receiver, is Chris Godwin. And Chris Godwin's better than DJ Moore to me. Chris Godwin is, just so steady and good. Kill to have a receiver like that. So I love that comparison. Now you get into some that are not as flattering, I think. Jalen Noel is comped by Brugler to Christian Kirk. And I'm not spending number 35 on Christian Kirk. Jaden Higgins, who I'm very curious about. Brugler says Nico Collins. The Ringer says Allen Robinson. Got to love both of those comparisons. Jalen Royals, Khalil Shakur from the Ringer. Trey Harris, who really, I sent out a graphic this week that made him look really good when he was plotted by an analytics guy. But Trey Harris, sorry, Romeo Dobbs, the Ringer pointed that out. Romeo Dobbs, a good receiver. I don't know. Would you take Romeo Dobbs 35th if he was in the draft, knowing what you know about him? I don't know about that. Jack Bash, who I love, but certainly I don't see as a number one in the traditional mold of a number one receiver. If you're looking for an ideal number one pairing with Calvin Ridley, Brugler sees Puka Nacua. Now, Puka Nacua's production, I can't argue about it. The Ringer sees Josh Palmer. And Josh Palmer, as a receiver, I would have liked to see the Titans chase in free agency. But I don't know. Based on what he's done in the league so far, you're not taking him 35th overall. Isaiah Bond is Raheed Shaheed, according to the Ringer. Eric Ao Manor, Nico Collins, says the Ringer. That's nice. Kyle Williams, couldn't find anything. I had to go to the 33rd team, which said Tyler Scott. And it took me a minute to remember Tyler Scott, who I liked coming out of Cincinnati, but he's not producing for the Bears as a 2023 fourth rounder. I think he's only started 4 or 5 games for a team there. So I'm curious what you think about these comps and who you like the best out of these guys. I really have a thing for Jack Besh. I think he just not going to make any mistakes. He's going to be in the right place at the right time, and he's going to produce. But is he explosive and dynamic, which is what you really want? No. Now, can you be a very good receiver without being exceptionally explosive and dynamic? Of course you can. But that's kind of a Titans historic thing. to not have explosive and dynamic wide receivers. And that would be, I could see being disappointed with that. Uh, She's got a little sound issue going on there. Sorry. So, who do you want at 35? The Titans away wanting a receiver, or do you think that those guys are not comparable to um, some of the edges who could be there? I mean, Michael Williams seems to have fallen. I don't see him getting out of the first round from Georgia. Donovan Ezekaru, I God, I'm really butchering his name, and I know it, from Boston College. I'm like having a stroke, a mini stroke. Ezerukaku, he's going to come into this second, probably. James Pierce, I think I'd be scared of with what we're hearing about him. JT Tuamola from Ohio State could be in that range. Landon Jackson. This is funny. Mike Herndon was on the radio with this week. Loves Landon Jackson from Arkansas. Teron Davenport echoed that. And then James Foster wrote a piece about guys the Titans should stay away from. And he listed Landon Jackson. Nick Scorton would be in that range. So are you thinking that those edges are more valuable, more talented than, excuse me, than the wide receivers would be? Dante Thornton is much further down the list. Richard says, I like Burden, but man, that East St. Louis area he grew up in is rough. Hopefully he weathered the storm of his neighborhood and will be a good guy off the field. I mean, I don't know how much you can take that. It'll take a second to say if you're watching on Twitter, please retweet. If you're watching on YouTube, give a thumbs up, subscribe. If you're listening later on YouTube, if you're listening later on Apple, Spotify, or iHeart, please subscribe, rate, and review. Every little bit helps. I am at the great Edley's. You can't get a better barbecue anywhere in Nashville. I am at the great location in Barry Farms, off 65 and Paytonsville Road. It's fantastic. You can't. The fried ribs here are just off the charts, but you're going to find something you like everywhere, and there are locations everywhere. This one in Franklin at the factory, 5 Points in East Nashville, where my guy Leon will whip you up a fantastic margarita to go with your barbecue. Sylvan Park, Donaldson, Gallatin, 12 South, and Nolensville. If you're in Nashville, you love good barbecue. If you love good barbecue, you love Edley's. Smell that. Smell it. So good. Come eat at Edley's. Back into what your response is here. Yeah, I stopped the show. 95 says, seen a couple of videos saying the Burden loafs on running his routes when he isn't the target. That's a little scary. Obviously, he's got to change his mindset a little bit in order to be a big-time NFL receiver. Yeah, he wants a combination of Trey Harris or a trade. Or a trade down and grab Restrepo later. My thing is Restrepo seems like he's going to be primarily a slot, and I think they need more than primarily a slot. I don't know where any rumors are coming that they're going to trade up for a wide receiver. They can't be giving up picks. They need to be getting picks. So would I rather trade up from 35, Ed Henry asks, giving up a fourth or fifth and grabbing a first-round player or trade back and recoup the third? I think they need numbers. I think there are enough receivers that we listed there that you can get a good one, if not at 35, at 45 in a trade back. I don't see a trade up. I think I think there could be somebody that they're in love with that they think is too good to pass up at 35. And I think we need to normalize the idea that they're just going to pick at 1 and 35 and then wait until the early fourth where they have, 103 and 120 or something like that. So And Dwayne, I think this is a sensible and probably popular thinking. I think you stand a better chance of finding a wide receiver later in the draft than an edge. Second round needs to be an edge. And this is largely what makes the case for them trading down at 35, right? Trade down, and a little bit. You get yourself two picks, a second and a third. Then you could address both in relatively short order. Robert says we had one. We let him go inexplicably. I think he's talking about NWI, uh, or he's talking about Landry. Either way, I don't think there's any huge, huge loss in either case. Sorry, I had to set something there. Amari Cooper about to join Flacco in Cleveland. That'd be a good combination for them. I don't think Amari Cooper is solving many of the Titans' problems. He's on a downswing right now, and I don't have a problem with the Titans not picking up people who are on a downswing. I think that's a good pickup for Cleveland, and I think Cleveland has some good talent. I think Cleveland gets bashed as being a dysfunctional franchise. I think they made and they have been a dysfunctional franchise, no doubt, for a long time. But I think they're a better franchise than they get credit for. They just made a terrible decision on Deshaun Watson, and that's Haslam. Haslam pretty much said, "My bad," which I don't know if it helps or not. I prefer a guy be accountable on that level. But they won with Joe Flacco 2 years ago. He's old. We'll see it. We'll see how it goes. Richard likes Sawyer as a fourth-round pick. Not sure he drops that far. Good high motor guy to have around. Yeah, but you know, I don't know if he drops that far either. But I think he's about motor more than he's about anything. If for some odd reason McMillan slipped into the mid 20s, that would be the only reason to move up. I just don't think you can move up. Another question here. Trade a 2026 pick or picks to get into the third round? No. No. Trade some of this year's picks and get it over with. You can't keep trading next year's picks and then heading into a draft missing picks. And to get into this year's third round, you probably need to give up next year's third round or next year's second round. Talked a little bit about Kyle Williams. The one comp I found for Kyle Williams didn't get me real excited, but we know Kyle Williams was at Washington State with Cam Ward, right? So there's a connection there. 33rd team compares him to Tyler Scott, who came out of Cincinnati 2 years ago, uh, and he hasn't produced a lot. Gentry's not getting out of the top 10. Better yet, into the second round. So I wouldn't be counting on that by any means, uh, by any means. And that would certainly complicate things. He's not getting there, though. Let me tell you about Zen Sports. Zen Sports, a longtime sponsor of this program. They've been great to me. High limits over there. Go over there, sign up at Zen Sports. It's Tennessee exclusive, so it's got that local flavor that you like. You can go over there and make a Masters bet or several Masters bet if you know who's winning. I haven't looked at the leaderboard today yet. I bet the same guys all the time. Cam Smith, Zalatoris, Fleetwood, Fitzgerald. Uh, Zalatoris could really help me out. I don't know what he's done so far, if he's even I didn't see him anywhere yesterday. Always love watching the Masters. My wife and I get into it. You can go to Zen Sports and you can make a bet bigger at Zen Sports than you can anywhere else. They're not going to limit you the way many of the other betting sites do, which is great if you're the kind of person that needs to drop a bet at a couple different sites when you really have a feel for what's going on and know you're going to collect a big win. Go and do it at Zen Sports instead, and they will take great care of you, treat you like the VIP that you are, get you tickets to the big game, put you in great seats, and take really good care of you. Zen Sports. Go there, sign up using the code TNPaul at Zen Sports. Trust me, they will treat you like royalty. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 and over in Tennessee to bet. CA says Frank Perrano is also back with Braves, but all of a sudden the injuries won't be record-breaking. Laugh out loud. I don't know why I hit on that. I apologize for the last 10 seconds of the podcast. Yeah, they want a running back, a between the tackles relief guy, and also maybe somebody that could be a second if Tajay Spears is not being productive. And I think that guy should come, in the 5th or 6th. So you can't answer questions like this. This is Michael. He said, if Restrepo is there at 103, you have to take him, right? Well, what if Ferguson, the tight end from Oregon's there at 103? You have to take him, right? I mean, you could say that about a ton of guys. You don't know who else is there. You don't know what you've done at wide receiver up to that point. You don't know if you're edge desperate at that point and there's an edge on the board. Somebody else asked about tight ends. I mean, I think they're definitely taking a tight end somewhere. And he's got to be a guy that can come in and contribute and ideally really push to be the number one tight end in this offense who can line up in line, block effectively, and catch some passes. And those guys are not easy to find. I would love Tyler Warren, Sergeant Bubbles said, but he's not making it out of the first round. Worried, but we'll see a run on tight ends late in round 1 like we saw last year, and the Titans will lose out on the guy they wanted waiting until 35. Well, the guy they want can't be a guy who's going to be drafted at 20 or 25. They have to have realistic expectations. I mean, last year, the guy they wanted was Alt, but they realized, from what I understand, pretty relatively early, by this stage of the process, certainly 2 or 3 weeks away, that Alt was going to the Chargers. And, you can't sit and lament that the guy you might prefer, is going to somebody else ahead of you. You look at the people who are available and you decide something about the people ahead of you who are available. Ivan says, I still feel like we need to keep drafting offensive linemen. If you have Callahan, I think you need to feed them talent. I think they will feed them talent. And obviously they had a couple linemen in, Charles Grant and the Ohio State guy. But I don't think you're spending value picks on offensive linemen, even if you trade into a situation where you have a second rounder and a third rounder. Conceivable that they do that, but that guy's going to sit. You've got a starting lineup. Offensive line depth, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're getting offensive line depth instead of edge starter or a wide receiver starter, I think plenty of us will have beef with that. So, the second, fourth rounder, one of the fifth rounders, certainly they need a developmental guard to go behind Zeitler, and ideally to be a starter next year after a good year from Zeitler, or to at least give you an option there. That's something that they need. No doubt about that. I didn't see this particular article, but LP Smith says The Athletic suggests trading a fourth for Cousins, taking Carter at 1, and then taking Milroe or Dart as a project in round 2. I mean, if you're trading a fourth for Cousins, you've already used up some of your draft capital. So why you then want a project? Milroe is not going to be a good NFL quarterback unless you build your offense. I mean, the only chance is to build your offense entirely around him with a ton of running, which is not the same offense that you would be running with Cousins. I don't like Dart either, so I wouldn't be against Cousins being the quarterback of the Titans for the next 2 years while you wait to draft a quarterback. I've got concerns about Carter's foot and maybe his shoulder and maybe his background. So those first two parts wouldn't kill me, but the Milrow Dart part, I'm not interested in at all. Hypothetical exercise. Pretend Will Levis is an elite quarterback. Who would you draft at 1, and how much easier would the rest of the draft likely go for management? Well, I'd trade out for sure. I would try to get somebody to come up and get the best offer I could for Cam Ward there. Try to stay in the top 4 and get Carter or Hunter. Hunter is the safest, but it's hard to take a corner, and they think of him as a corner first, at 1. But that's what I would do. Do I feel Tyjae Spears takes a step forward this year? Probably not. Tends to be dinged up, and I don't think he's that great a runner. I think he's a really good pass catcher. I would try to get him the ball as a pass catcher, and I would stop talking about it being a 2-man backfield and kind of talk about it more like what it is. It's not a 50-50. It's a 75-25, right? Better depth than NPF. Of course it's better depth than NPF. And hopefully the guy they signed from Jacksonville is better depth than NPF. But yeah, I mean, if you draft a guy in the second or third round, if they had a third-round pick, or in the 4th round, hopefully he's better depth than NPF. But it doesn't solve your problem at starting edge or starting wide receiver. Jim Stamos, thank you for your thoughts about Finley. How likely do I feel the Titans will stay put taking Cam? I mean, it looks very strongly like they're staying put and taking Cam. I don't think they're taking any of these other quarterbacks later. If they surprised us and took a quarterback later, I think it would be McCord from Syracuse. Will Levis. Some people are making cracks about Will Levis. If you haven't read at paulkuharsky.com, you should subscribe and head over to read about Will Levis's progress. It's a weird situation for him. He's going to report for the first day of OTAs, which isn't any formally structured stuff. He can throw to receivers, but not with any coverage, and only with strength and conditioning coaches on the field. But he'll get there on a Monday, and on Thursday they'll draft Cam Ward, and he'll no longer be the number 1 quarterback. I talked somewhat extensively with Jordan Palmer, the quarterback coach who he's working with in Southern California, for an intensive 6 weeks where he kind of, I don't want to say rebuilt himself, but formed some new habits that should help him. Palmer's really big on everything starting from the ground up. And from the ground up, you've got to, Callahan kind of talked about it, not having any problem with his throwing, but by his throwing, he meant his arm. You don't have any issue with his arm. It's lower body stuff. And Jordan Palmer said, it's being able to start over again as everybody gets to do each offseason and focus on how we're using the ground to create leverage to move that is showing up in every drop, every movement, evading defenders, and plays a role in how the throwing sequence begins, which really is your throwing motion. So more of that at paulkuharsky.com. I respect that Levis is working this hard. And Palmer said he doesn't believe anybody's putting in any more hours than Levis has been putting in for this 6 weeks before he returns. They maintain their relationship for the entire year, so he'll be checking in and getting, reviews of his tape and stopping there for a couple days here and there, and probably going there during the June July rest in the schedule. And maybe Levis isn't here. Maybe they find a way to trade him and hand the backup job to Brandon Allen. I don't think Brandon Allen's more talented than Will Levis. Maybe he's ultimately a better um, decision maker in relief. Dwayne says it's a shame Levis didn't train with Palmer last offseason. And I agree with that. And Stop the Show says Levis could have the greatest mechanics in the world, and it still wouldn't matter when he panics in the pocket. And look, I'm down on Will Levis, like everybody's down on Will Levis, but you have to leave open the possibility that a guy gets better. And I don't think he's going to have a chance to get better as the Titans starting quarterback here, but he has a chance to get better as a backup. And I do think, in time he could surface somewhere else as a reclamation project. I think, and I've said this repeatedly, if he goes somewhere and sits the bench behind a quality starter, um, working with a quality veteran, offensive-minded head coach, he could pop out of that and, have a chance to be, you know, a Baker Mayfield in year 7. Not as good as Baker Mayfield, but a Geno Smith, one of these guys that has a later career resurgence. Uh, Is there any scenario that we retain Levis as a backup? I mean, I don't know why we would say that's the weird scenario. Levis is on the team now. The question should be: is there any scenario where they don't retain Levis as a backup? You know, they may deal him. If you deal Will Levis, for a pick swap of a 6th to a 5th, I don't know. Are you getting value there? Doesn't seem like a great value to me. Um, so I'm not totally out on Levis. I mean, from a position behind Cam Ward, working together with Cam Ward through practices and everything, you know, I don't love him, and it's a mental thing. But he's got a skill set that has some appeal, and I think it's better to keep him and see what becomes of that in a year as a backup than to really try to ship him out of town unless you think that he's going to have an attitude as a backup, or unless everybody in the building, nobody in the building really had a role in bringing him in. Brinker was around for that, but not in a position of power like he is now. And so maybe everybody in the building didn't like him coming out. And if that's the case, then I could understand um, maybe parting ways on that regard. But it's also, it's going to move up a third string quarterback in Boyd, who's not anything. But you're not going to be a 3 quarterback team when the season rolls around anyway. They should pay us to take Kirk, Billy Jones says, of the Falcons. Um, Jack Ripper says, I want to keep him as a backup, ? I think you take Ward number 1, and Levis will know where he stands, ? He won't love it, but he will understand. Well, I mean, he's had plenty of time to come to terms with that. Palmer kind of said, it's a good time for him to be in the mode of Boyle. I said Boyd, by the way. It's a good time for him to be, very much in the present of the day-to-day stuff with this situation coming. But then when I asked him more about, had they talked about Ward, the potential of Ward and all of that stuff, he didn't want to get into any of that stuff. Yeah. Callie is supposed to be a quarterback whisperer, but he hasn't done much with Levis, says CA. Yes, supposed to be a quarterback whisperer, and in his first season, he had a quarterback who was making a lot of dumb decisions, and he didn't do much with Levis. Does that erase everything that Brian Callahan was supposed to be with regard to being a good quarterback coach? No, um, not not to me. To a lot of fans, it seems to have done that. And Callahan seems to have zero standing after a 3-14 season and no success with Will Levis. Um, and here Tall Texan said Callahan has worked with proven quarterbacks. He hasn't ever molded a good one. Well, it's not his fault that he was on teams that had good backup, that had good quarterbacks, right? So you can't blame him for being around good quarterbacks. And I think, you have to give him at least partial credit for Jake Browning. And Jake Browning stepped in for the Bengals 2 years ago, right? And did some good things. And I will say this. The CA says, look how impressive LaFleur was with Willis. So this isn't a Callahan question. I mean, I think Malik Willis was broken here, but Callahan didn't have Malik Willis in the regular season to work with. But what Green Bay did with Malik Willis, game plan wise, was exactly what Mike Vrabel and Tim Kelly did with Malik Willis, game plan wise, when they were forced to play him the year before. Malik Willis executed it better. So, did they brush him up better? Yeah. Did the receivers catch the deep ball that he threw? The one crucial deep ball in the game, as opposed to dropping it or him overthrowing it in the Titans game that looked very familiar. Did the Packers defense play a little better in a game that needed to be a defensive win for the Packers than the Titans defense played in a game that needed to be a defensive win for Willis? And I know Willis played more than one, but I'm describing kind of the philosophy. Yes. So, I mean, the Packers are a better organization, more equipped to win with a backup quarterback who's very limited than the Titans were. But, I mean, do we think that Malik Willis has become a good quarterback in Green Bay? And he was a bad quarterback in Tennessee? That's just not the case. They won with him. So, I mean, that looks impressive, and that's a much better result, and that's what it comes down to. But I don't think Brian Callahan failed Malik Willis in some huge way, and Matt LaFleur succeeded with him in some huge way. I think there's a thin line there. And Malik Willis's failure in Tennessee was already in the bank by the time Brian Callahan took over with him. And we'll end on this. Stop the Show 95 says we'll get to see what Callahan can do with Ward. And that seems to be where they're going. I'm sorry I was off my game a little bit today. I know many of you were giving me condolences about the dog. And it's going to be a little while, I think, before I'm back to myself, but that's no excuse for butchering names and the like. So hope you'll give me a little grace there. Bet at Zen Sports. Eat at Edley's Barbecue. Subscribe to paulkuharski.com. Blake Bedingfield piece coming soon about their options at 35 and the directions he thinks that the Titans could go there. That's something that you will want to read for sure. I appreciate your long-standing support, and those of you who have not been around much, I look forward to seeing you as new members of the site. So we'll see you soon. Lots of good content to come at paulkuharski.com. I appreciate you joining me, and I hope you have a great weekend, and that guy you want to see in the green jacket's wearing it on Sunday evening. Take care, everybody. Thanks a lot for your continued support.